the Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
Mr. Vice President, I'm going off script again, I know, but I just want to personally thank you. We've been through some stuff. We've gone through some of the most complex military operations this country's ever conducted, and your steady hand and your leadership during those was a great source of strength for me. Thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your character. Thank you for your selfless service. Thank you for commitment. Thank you for being a mentor to me, Mr. Vice President.
It's called the swamp. And you know what happened? And you know what I did? A big favor. I caught the swamp. I caught them all. Let's see what happens. Nobody else could have done that but me. I caught all of this corruption that was going on, and nobody else could have done it. Did I get that one right? Every 4 years, we gather on these steps to carry out the orderly and peaceful transfer of power. Today's ceremony, however, has very special meaning, because today we are not merely transferring power from one administration to another, but we are transferring power from Washington, D.C., and giving it back to you, the people. For too long, a small group in our nation's capital has reaped the rewards of government, while the people have borne the cost. Washington flourished, but the people did not share in its wealth. This American carnage stops right here and stops right now. The forgotten men and women of our country will be forgotten no longer. From this day forward, a new vision will govern our land. From this day forward, it's going to be only America first.
This is a president of the United States who is a danger to the Republic.
America first.
He knows he's an illegitimate president.
The oath of office I take today is an oath of allegiance to all Americans.
The great Trump recovery.
America will never be a socialist country. I will fight for you with every breath in my body.
Russia, Russian, pro-Russian, Russian, Russia, Russian, 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 the Russians.
Russia.
And I will never, ever let you down.
A dangerous virus is spreading rapidly in China, and U.S. officials are very worried that it could come here.
This is really the worst attack we've ever had. This is worse than Pearl Harbor. This is worse than the World Trade Center. There's never been an attack like this.
The time for empty talk is over. Now arrives the hour of action. What they're doing is using COVID to steal an election. Together, we will make America strong again. You know what it's about? Fraud, fake ballots. We will make America wealthy again. They are trying to steal the election.
Now, under the leadership of President Trump, we are fully realizing President Kennedy's prescient view of Special Operations Forces.
We will make America proud again. And watch, please, those mail-in ballots. We will make America safe again. And in millions and millions of ballots. Their vote is under what they thought they needed. They're dumping more ballots in there, okay? And yes, together, we will make America great again. Thank you. God bless you. If we are right about the fraud, Joe Biden can't be president.
Congress, the chair declares the joint session dissolved.
Okay, people. It finally happened. It took 2.5 years, going on 3 years. But after trials, tribulations, subversion, infiltration instead of invasion, I have successfully deposed John Harold from the Devolution Power Hour. He is no more, and the Brightsurrection has been successful. If you're a fan of the Brightsurrection tonight, and I'm going to have an accomplice joining me, please hit the thumbs up button. This is just about commitment. The theme of the show tonight is about commitment. I'm going to bring in my guest, my co-host, Ghost of Base Patrick Henry, who is now party to everything I've said already in the lead up to this automatically. I think that's how it worked in the Revolution, right? So that's how it works on this show. You are officially part of the insurrection, the overthrow of John Harold. How are you feeling about that? Conflicted?
We either hang together or we hang separately, so there's no turning back.
So Ghost believes this ends in our death, no matter what. But it will be a good show either way. Now, the reason that the theme of this show is commitment. You see, I knew it was going to happen at some point, but John, his heart isn't in it. His heart isn't in the Devolution Power Hour. I think he was really largely inspired by me when he came up with this show. Before he knew me, he just knew down the line. And he'd rather just go party in Vegas than give the people what they want. He was going to pre-record, we're going to pre-record the Power Hour. And I said, John, the people want a live Devolution Power Hour. And only Ghost and I are willing or able, perhaps the latter, to deliver that to them. So that's what we're going to do tonight. We are live in the flesh. We're going to do a Devolution Power Hour. We probably won't talk about devolution almost at all, but we're just going to do a show, and it's called the Devolution Power Hour. So, I think we're feeling optimistic.
Strom Thurmond is officially on notice because we are going to break his filibuster record tonight when he and the Democrats opposed the Civil Rights Act of 1963. So that's the record still in Congress for the longest filibuster in history, and we're going to break it.
Yeah, I mean, it was funny. Before the show, John had texted me like, yeah, you can just tell people it's not going to go long or whatever because, you guys have to travel and everything. And I didn't even respond. I'm like, that's a nice sentiment, but it's me and then it's you, the other me. So I think we'll see what happens tonight. I think we have some good things to discuss. We're going to probably start with some reactions to the State of the Union. I know you guys probably watched the live coverage. I know Ghost was on the live coverage last night. But it's always good to give some 24-hour digestible thoughts on that kind of thing. We'll touch on the SCOTUS thing. That's not really where either of us has been diving this week, but we can just touch on it a little bit. And we actually want to spend the bulk of the show kind of talking about Trump and the art of the deal. Ghost talks about this a lot on his show, The Book of Trump. But in terms of the current battle space, the current narrative, it's all art of the deal. I mean, every theory you look at, from Canada to Ukraine to the Middle East, it's just deal making, wheeling and dealing, 5th gen warfare, and it's also pretty damn entertaining.
Yeah, how about the fact because CanCon's been sharing this in the private chat, these videos of I think her name is Katie on MSNBC. She's like in real time having these revelations that the Sovereign Alliance is real. It's like how amazing is that? Where she's sitting there and she has what's his name, Moulton, congressman, and it's like blowing his mind. He's like, yeah, I just can't even consider that. Like I got it. She's like, but what if Trump is trying to remake the world and make these people like the rulers of the world, like the powerful people in the world? And he's like, his brain literally just breaks when she says it, and it's amazing.
Yeah. In fairness, that was CanCon as recently as like 6 months ago. So let's not give him too much credit on that. Not everybody, you get the awakening on the timeline you deserve. Before we get into anything, and before we get into our sponsors of tonight's show, GART Vegas is tomorrow night. Apparently, some people in Badlands think it's tonight because people are already in Vegas. But if you guys have not, there are single-day tickets available. But really what it's all about at this time of the week is the virtual tickets. You can go to badlandsmedia.tv/events or click on the events tab at badlandsmedia.tv. I will be in Vegas, actually. I'm going to be there for a truncated GART, but going to try to make the most of it. I'll be there Friday and Saturday. And Ghost, you'll be there tomorrow, right?
Yep, I will be there tomorrow. So I'll be there for a less truncated version, but yeah, it's scary. I'm going to Vegas for 4 days. It's like you never know what's going to happen. It's like, are you even going to come back? So
well, and we are.
I might just become a permanent fixture in Vegas, and y'all will come back in 5 years, and I'll be like a blackjack dealer and not even have memory of this life, you know. And that's just what happens, you know.
We'll all be on Hair Watch for Ghost. For anybody who is not aware of GART lore, the level to which Ghost is alternatively partaking in libations and or debate, usually at the same time, you can tell where he's at by the state of his hair at any given moment. And it doesn't recover. Like, you'd think he goes back to his room and like he gets his shit together and it gets in order, but it just stays at the same level of disheveledness, I would say. Stylish disheveledness.
Only escalation, man. It's a one-way street.
Absolutely. All right, guys. So virtual tickets is what it's all about this week. There are single days available. The virtual gets you access to a Telegram chat. That's kind of the big thing most people like there. And yeah, I mean, I will probably be dead at the end of the weekend as well. And I think we all will, but we'll all die. As Ghost said, we'll hang together. And before we get into the show, I want to thank our sponsors. John's sort of command center stresses me out. I don't like the way it's set up, but I'm going to do the best I can. The show is brought to you by our friends at Field of Greens with their product, Field of Greens Lean. Are you a yo-yo dieter? You diet, lose weight, but gain it all back, plus a few extra pounds. Then later you lose it and regain it again and again. It's dangerous. Studies show that can increase your risk of heart attack, stroke, type 2 diabetes, and other health problems. Breaking free of your yo-yo diet pattern is a main reason doctors created Lean. Lean is a supplement, not an injection, and you don't need a prescription. The science behind Lean is impressive. It studied natural ingredients target weight loss in 3 powerful ways. Lean helps maintain healthy blood sugar, control appetite and cravings, and burn fat by converting fat into energy. If you're tired of losing weight and gaining it back, if you want to lose meaningful weight at a healthy pace, Lean was created for you. Let me get you started with 20% off when you enter John20 at takelean.com. That's code John20 at takelean.com. Thank you to our friends at Field of Greens. Been supporting the show for a long time. I'm sorry about the promo code. I can't do anything about that. We'll talk to the guys at Field of Greens, because as the insurrection takes root, it's going to be awkward if we just keep those kind of, dated promo codes. So we don't want to be super awkward right now. Please understand there's a transition period, just like we're going through right now with Trump. And we are also brought to you by a very exciting and perhaps new sponsor that has me salivating. And that is our friends at Rattlesnake Meats. Stop funding the cartel. I'm not talking about cartels at the southern border. I'm talking about the 4 globalist multinational meat packers that control 85% of America's beef supply. Their beef, who knows where it was really raised? That's a better way. There's a better way. Buy directly from a real American rancher. At Rattlesnake Meat Company, they deliver premium 21-day aged American beef straight from the ranch to your door. No mRNA, no added hormones, no pink slime, no meat glue. Just real beef, born, raised, and processed in Kansas, USA. Every dollar you spend is a vote. Vote for the American rancher. Vote against the globalist agenda. Go to badlandsmedia.tv/meat. Use the promo code BADLANDS20 for $20 off to take back control of your beef. That's badlandsmedia.tv/meat. Promo code BADLANDS20. Tell the beef cartel, don't tread on me. I was not aware of meat glue and all those kinds of other things, but nothing surprises me these days.
Yeah, I think there is. I think meat glue. That's how they make chicken nuggets. I think is meat glue.
Yeah.
So,
man, with all the Maha stuff and everything now, it is amazing to look back at what I was eating at school for school lunches, buying lunches for $1.50 at the time, and it was always. I mean, I didn't necessarily grow up in an affluent area, but yeah, for us, it was like chicken nuggets and pizza pretty much every day.
Yep,
Blue
that's what it
nuggets
was
and pizza.
at our school too. It was like really, really thin, kind of gross pizza. But when you're a kid, whatever.
Damn straight. All right, Ghost. So the big news of Tuesday, I mean, there's big news every hour, basically. We can't cover all of it, but we had the State of the Union. Trump got up there. It was funny. I listened to a bit of your commentary, the groups after, and I think John used the word boilerplate, and it kind of got some people annoyed, but it really got me thinking the different filter this community has that we put onto narrative deployments. And that's why sometimes there's a little bit of a bifurcation or a line of demarcation between like how Badlanders are viewing a narrative deployment versus how it maybe hit the normie zeitgeist. So how did you feel coming out of it? I didn't see your commentary, maybe on either side of that divide.
Yeah, I mean, so I think when he says boilerplate, I tend to kind of agree with him, just meaning that it's stuff that we, for the most part, were already aware of. There wasn't new intel, like dropped.
Yeah.
It seemed to me like the spirit of it, the purpose of it was really more, it was more of like a pep rally, but pep rally on steroids, where there was like bringing all the different people out that he brought out. It didn't feel like they were being brought out for the purposes of like political props, like it does when Obama did it, or, you know, I'm sure when George Bush did it, I was too young to really care back then. But there was like a real sense of camaraderie that you kind of got out of it. And there was a lot of, you know, I mean, there's just a lot of positive sentiment, I guess you'd say. And then of course you have the Democrats sitting there just being the worst. And not that I buy into the false paradigm of the two party system, but it's pretty clear to me
either way.
Yeah. Well, it's pretty clear to me that the Democrats are just a totally irrelevant political movement at this point, and it's not even like worth talking about them anymore because they're never going to be, I don't think, anything of significance, especially as the truth becomes more prevalent and people just start openly talking about things as we should have been doing the whole time.
Right. Yeah, I largely agree with you, and I totally agree when you say boilerplate. When John said boilerplate, you know, it's funny. I'd written a brief in that came out today. I named it "Radical Normalcy" because I kind of was thinking about it, and it was funny in the moment when I was watching Trump's speech. I wasn't annoyed or anything. I mean, it wasn't like I came away with it with a negative impression. I was just going like, oh yeah, I mean,
exactly.
Yeah, we get it all right. But kind of the more I marinated on it, the more I started to think just how surreal and signal-based that is as a prospect. So the reason I'd named that article "Radical Normalcy" is that if you rewind just a few years, I mean, even a few months, if you look at the mainstream narrative, the Trumpism, Donald Trump and the MAGA base, and certainly Badlanders, are what the regime and the central narrative would consider extremists, right? Like at the very, however they want to define that, they describe us as extremists. And his speeches lately are so normal, not just in terms of his emotion and delivery, but the subject matter is basically just normalcy on a platter. Like, hey, men and women exist. Men shouldn't be in women's sports. We're going to onshore American production. We're going to cut American taxes. We're going to bring American jobs back. Like all these things that are just the most normal things imaginable are all of the things that the opposition have tried to deem extreme. So to your point, the enduring image coming out of it wasn't Trump, it was this. And you know, a few years ago, it probably would have been this in a very annoying and stressful way where it was taking over all the headlines. But what I took out of it, to your point, was these people truly are irrelevant. And I think it was just kind of a masterstroke in simplicity where Trump, he basically just gave the most vanilla, nationalist, kind of common, as he said, common sense is having a comeback. However he worded that, common sense is popular these days. He he did a common sense speech, and it put the opposition in a position where they had to basically run out the string and play out the script of being these screeching harpies or silent curmudgeons about just super vanilla, bipartisan talking points. And it's so obvious to people watching this show, but man, I really think it was effective. Like, I really think even in the normie hive mind, a lot of lefties or people who weren't fans of Trump were probably looking at that just being like, man, you guys can't just give one night and just be like, okay, we're not a fan of the guy, but yeah, sure, we want American production. We think men and women exist, like stuff like that.
Yeah. And that was kind of the rug pull, because I think Trump has conditioned these people for a long time to view him as, this radical zealot, so to speak, who kind of embodies these really crazy ideas. But then he comes out and he gives a speech that is, like you said, right down the middle, a lot of common sense, and their instinct is just to react to it and do the opposite. And so they're going to boo him no matter what he does, no matter what he says. And so he comes out and says something very sensible and very reasonable. And I mean, the highlight of the night to me was like DJ Daniels, the kid who was the brain cancer survivor.
Right.
Like, that was probably one of the highlights for me, and I think others. And then there were a few other moments like that. But it's like, how do you boo that? And somehow they were like, I forgot who the person was. It wasn't DJ Daniels. It was somebody else. But they like didn't stand up and applaud for one of these victims, and it's like, it just felt so like malicious. And then there was that woman on CNN who came out and said that really ugly comment about DJ Daniels, where she's like, yeah, well, I mean, I hope the kid's okay, but, and then took her stab at Trump. And
right,
it's so petty, man. It's just so awful. These people are just really, really bad people at their core.
Is this image working for you? Can you see what I'm looking at?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know what people are going crazy in the chat saying it's not working. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't working earlier.
No, I've seen it the whole time.
Strange. They seem to be saying it's blacked out or something.
No, I mean, it's working for me here. Let me pull it up on I'm gonna pull it. Oh, that is weird. No, wait, no, dude,
is it working now?
So I'm looking at the live stream on Rumble right now, and it is. It just, all I can see is the Devolution background.
What the hell?
That is so weird. And I don't have admin permission, so I can't see what you have selected in terms of your layout. Not that I'm a StreamYard expert.
What the hell? I've been doing this on my mine, and it works fine. So this is some sort of problem.
This must have been a Herodian
I know.
setting that probably some sort of failsafe to keep the insurrection from succeeding.
Man, if I can't share my screen tonight, that is going to be very annoying. I wonder if share. What about chat? Is this working?
It's working. So it's working for me. In StreamYard, I can 100% see it.
What about you guys? Mine's working. There's people in the chat saying it's working. Is this a psyop? Is this a psyop?
Dude, this is definitely a psyop, because I'm watching the live stream on Rumble and I can't see it. What the hell?
Yeah, it's not working on Rumble. What the hell? This is bullshit.
That is.
I have no idea.
I've never seen this before. I've never seen this before at all.
Huh.
Brad, I don't know if Brad has admin permission on John's.
I have no idea why this is not working.
I saw Brad in the chat. Like, if he wants to jump in and see what the hell's going on.
So strange. All right. Well, maybe let me share this with you in the chat.
Do that, and then let me
see if your screen works when I share it from your side.
We can try that.
At the stage. All right. Now is it working?
I'm waiting for the Rumble.
It's still not working, right? It's still blank on the.
I'm waiting for the Rumble feed to catch up, and no, it's still not working.
Wow! What the hell?
What the hell?
All right,
dude, laugh my ass off.
Maybe we can't screen share tonight. What is going on here? That is so
pretty
strange.
insane. That's really strange.
Anyway, if you're new here, sorry about that. Usually this stuff works totally fine. Hold on. What do we got?
And I mean, on our end, like StreamYard, I can see it 100%. So it looks like a normal show, but I am looking at it on Rumble and it's not there. Weird.
Very strange.
You know what? Let me go to let's try one more thing. Do it again. Do a screen share. I'm gonna go to X and see if it's working on X. Like let's just see if it's Rumble.
Yeah. Strange. All right. Well, we can just it's
not working on X either. So it's definitely a StreamYard. It's a StreamYard issue for sure.
All right. Strange. All right. Well, we'll just have to describe to you the stuff that we're looking at.
Yeah. Cool.
Anyway. Yeah. Well, my other thought. So the image I was trying to show you guys was the infamous one with all of the peanut gallery opposition holding up their signs, false, etc. And besides the fact that you have, like you said, the Democrat Party, the opposition is basically dead, and that was the kill shot, or at least it wasn't the kill shot on Tuesday night, but I think it was just, it rendered it so clear that side of the aisle is dead. But another thing that really struck me that I was thinking about today is we have had, since the advent of the Trump era, we've had villains. And, we talk about the deep state, we talk about the system and all that kind of stuff. But there's always been faces and names to the storyline in the U.S. kind of political scene. At the beginning of the Trump era, it was Hillary Clinton. Then it kind of transitioned into, at times it was Obama, transitioned into Joe Biden. Then Kamala Harris had a little stint. And one of the big takeaways that I had from the State of the Union was there are no characters on the U.S. scene that are basically worthy villains in the central narrative right now. In the story of Donald Trump, they're all vanquished, basically. There's not really anybody waiting in the wings. Like we've got these little spats with Gavin Newsom a month ago, etc. But in terms of like an opposition, there's nobody there. At this point, it's basically I'm not even talking from the perspective of elections itself, but in terms of the narrative deployments that are hitting the American hive mind, it's Trump versus Trudeau, it's Trump versus Starmer, it's Trump Macron, it's Trump Netanyahu, Trump Putin, whatever it is, Zelensky. The U.S. opposition is essentially completely neutered from a narrative perspective. And I feel like that was one of my major takeaways, is that they were just reduced as a villain to basically petulant children that were alternatively pouting or being escorted from the chamber because they couldn't play nice with everybody else.
Yeah, that's well said. There really is nobody left in Trump's weight class, like in the U.S., to use a fight analogy, which I know will appeal to you. Yeah, I mean, everyone has just been completely sidelined because they have zero credibility left, and they're all so unlikable and just so unrelatable, and they've had the worst take on the worst position on every single issue for really going on 10 years now. I mean, obviously way longer, but I think for the past 10 years, enough of the public has woken up that they realize just how silly and foolish it all is.
Yep. Yeah. So, I mean, anything else stand out to you about the State of the Union? I think it's stuff that we've been talking about forever.
Yeah. No, not really. I think it was pretty right down the middle. And, us being like news junkies and consuming this stuff every single day, I think we look for like the next fix, right? Like we look for like the next deployment, the next like juicy intel drop from Trump, like the next development in the info war. And so when we don't get that, that's when we refer to it. We're like, oh, well, this is all just boilerplate. We've heard this all before. We heard this yesterday. We heard this last week. We heard this last month. So
Right.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of how you summarize it.
Exactly. Well, and again, I think it can sound like we're always looking for new stuff. We're always looking for these new deployments and everything. I'm also seeing that the ad read didn't show. That means, all right, our friends at Foglean. This is how I can cheat here. And then we have no audio if I do that. So
put us on the side. Put us on the side. There should be share your screen. Hey, share your screen.
This?
There you go. Yeah, do that. Yep, there you go.
Hold on. Share my screen like this.
Well, now it's all black.
Can I do this? Will that work?
Yeah, that is. Yeah.
On the broadcast?
No. Well, it's working.
Oh yeah, it's working.
Yes, it is working. It's working. Okay. You figured out a way to subvert the subverters.
Now what if I have the background on there? Does that remove it? Let's see. We're looking in real time on that's working now. What the hell?
Now. Yeah.
What?
Okay. Sweet. So we're back. We're back, baby. We're back.
Okay. Well, hold on 1 second then.
Do the ad read again.
This couldn't get any more professional or less professional. So this was our friends at Field of Greens. Sorry I didn't have the image up before. But takelean.com, promo code DPH20.
Yep, you get a second ad read out of it.
All right. So, yeah. That's how it works. All right. Other than the State of the Union, then, it looks like this is going to work. Yeah, thanks, guys. Figured this all out. This was a big story today. I am not going to pretend I understand where it's going, etc. But we had the Supreme Court apparently ruled in a shock ruling 5-4 against the freezing of $2 billion in USAID funds. So this was all about Trump. So, all right, I'll just read what Jonathan Turley says here. I like Turley because he tends to not give you the boilerplate, as we would say, reading of this kind of stuff. In an interesting 5-4 split, the Supreme Court has denied the Trump administration's application for a stay of a district court's temporary restraining order against the administration's effort to freeze $2 billion in funds from the U.S. Agency for International Development. So, typical freaking legalese, right? The way that line reads. We've got a judge ordered a stay against Trump's order to freeze $2 billion in funding. Trump's team issued a restraining order against the stay, and SCOTUS apparently did not rule in favor of the restraining order. So, meaning that it seems like the stay in the freeze failed.
Yeah.
So think of how many, like, this is why people don't like reading about this kind of stuff. The stay in the freeze has failed. From what I understand, this is funding that was already distributed, I believe. Turley doesn't seem too doomed out about it. He says the unsigned order refuses to stay the temporary restraining order for the U.S. District Judge Amir Ali to force the payment of money frozen by the administration. However, there's more than meets the eye. While unsigned, it is clear that Chief Justice Roberts and Associate Justice Amy Coney Barrett joined the three liberal justices. The dissenters were Samuel Alito, Thomas Gorsuch Kavanaugh, and I thought this was interesting. The dissent was pretty damn emphatic. So the dissent people are in my head saying the screen's not showing, but it is. The dissent says, does a single district court judge who likely lacks jurisdiction have the unchecked power to compel the government of the U.S. to pay out $2 billion taxpayer dollars? The answer to that question should be an emphatic no, but a majority of this court apparently thinks otherwise. I am stunned. Alito acknowledged the lower court's frustration with the government, as well as the serious concerns about non-payment for completed work. So that's the key there. This is payment for apparently completed work. However, he noted that this is quite simply too extreme a response A federal court has many tools to address a party's supposed nonfeasance. Self-aggrandizement of its jurisdiction is not one of them. So Turley says the key here is that this was a controversial move to review a temporary restraining order, which is generally not reviewable. What is clear is that there are 4 justices who are still prepared to do so and would obviously be likely to grant review in the next round. The next round would come after the hearing on the preliminary injunction, which is scheduled for March 6th. It can then be appealed to these awaiting justices. Only 4 are needed to grant review, so you do the math. I mean, from where I'm sitting, this seems like he's saying this fight isn't over, right? Like it's going to be appealed. It reminds me of several recent decisions we've had where one federal judge somewhere in the country seems to currently have the ability to just kind of step in and stop executive actions by Trump pending further review. And that's kind of what I see going on here. Maybe it's a less extreme example than we've seen in the recent past, but it feels to me like if we're looking at any kind of plan or game theory going on here, maybe that's the key. It's this idea that Trump wants it front and center, and he wants this kind of argument going on of where does judicial power stop and executive power begin and vice versa. And that's being fought out among the different court levels, but I don't know how you see it.
Yeah, I mean, I would tend to agree. And I didn't even know about this. It's amazing how much stuff is happening that you can be like invested. I did a 2-hour news show today, and I was doing geopolitics, but I didn't even know about this till we were like right before we went live. I've had a chance to really dig into it. Where it gets confusing is they use the word stay, and what they really mean is that the money's being forced through. So the money's frozen, and then the Supreme Court's now saying, nope, the money's out the door.
Right.
Amy Coney Barrett
staying the freeze.
Yeah, I mean, Amy Coney Barrett has been kind of a disappointment to me. I mean, there's been a lot of moments where she has just failed, like fallen flat on her face, and inexplicably like ruled in places where people have tried to, put window dressing on it, but I don't really know how you put lipstick on this pig. Basically, what they're saying is that the Congress or the State Department, I guess technically this would be USAID, but the State Department has the right to steal from you, steal from the American people, steal from the taxpayers, and there's no recourse. We have no recourse to stop them. They can extract as much wealth as they want out of us because we are their slaves. And that's what this is. This is a slave system where we are slaves on a tax farm plantation, and they can just extract wealth out of us, send it out the door to their friends abroad. Their friends are then going to launder it, clean it, and send it back to them in various forms. And the Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett is the key person here because we know the other ones are probably compromised. And she's saying,
Roberts has never been well liked in this world.
Yeah, it's like, that's exactly right. They have the right to steal money from you. So I would say shut the government down, like shut it down, stop paying these people, cut off all of their salaries. I'm more than I think it should be celebrated. It should be a national holiday the day the government shuts down.
Yeah. Well, breaking news. I haven't even read this, but Trump is watching the show, I assume, and decided to weigh in on this. So, first of all, let me see if this is actually working again on the stream. This is what we're going to have to do all night. It is not. Oh my goodness. Absolutely crazy. How about this? Trump put out a truth post on this very topic. So strange. Okay, now it's working on the stream. He said, the fake play the ref news in order to create a divide between me and our great U.S. Supreme Court heard me say last night loudly and openly as I was walking past the justices on the way to the podium, thank you to Chief Justice John Roberts. Like most people, I don't watch fake news CNN or MSDNC, but I understand they're going crazy asking what is it that I was thanking Justice Roberts for. They never called my office to ask, of course, but if they had, I would have told these sleazebag journalists that I thanked him for swearing me in on Inauguration Day and doing a really good job in doing so. The fake news never quits. Obviously, that seems a little bit adjacent to what we're talking about, but it's pretty interesting in light of on the macro. Not an expert in this specific deployment, don't know where it's going, the terminology, the legalese, etc. But I do think that that's kind of interesting signal out of Trump of saying, he said this recently about Elon Musk and what the media has been trying to do between him and Musk. So Trump is telling you, hey, the divide between me and the Supreme Court is being greatly exaggerated. So it'll be interesting, if you want to take him at his word and take him just literally there, then you might say this is part of that whole narrowing thing we've been talking about on the Power Hour for 2 or 3 years. The idea that we are trying to narrow the authority or define the authority of the president, define the authority of the Supreme Court by extension. I see you've got here Bannon. I saw a lot of people in chat talking about this.
Yeah,
Mike Davis.
Mike Davis, who's he's a pretty good legal mind on this stuff, and it's a 5-minute video, so you don't need to watch the video. But just the quote right there is. Okay. The quote right there is that she's a rattled law professor with her head up head up her ass.
Yeah, she's a rattled law professor. It's interesting. I mean, I don't know, and I think this is another one of those deployments that we've got to be bicameral about it, right? I think that people are alternatively predisposed to either doom out about it and freak out, or there can be the opposite side of the spectrum where they're like, it's all the plan, don't worry about it. And, I'm a plan guy. I think that there is a plan going on. I don't think that Trump didn't know what he was doing when he was fortifying the Supreme Court. But as we always say, we don't know what the plan is, right? And the plan might not be to cheerlead for Amy Coney Barrett. The plan might be to take a look at her and, have this kind of dispute going on in the public so that we can narrow some of this authority. We just don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I would say we need to basically just trim down the federal government to its absolute bare bones and stop giving them just open access to our bank accounts where they can just extract 25% of our income and then tax basically every single time we do anything with our money. We're then taxed again. It's insane. It's not a reasonable system.
Right. Yeah, and I'm pretty optimistic about what the deployments are or what the goal is in this administration, and it does seem like that's what they're trying to do. Actually, speaking of taxation and everything, I don't know if people had seen that the IRS is reportedly getting hit with huge layoffs. I think a lot of them are.
I think 50%. I think they're firing 50% of their workforce, which is a great start, but we need to double that number as soon as possible.
Those are rookie numbers, right?
Yeah. And I mean, you bring up a good point about dooming out. This is the theme of GART this time, by the way, like forward thinking, like a think tank, like we need to talk this out. And this kind of goes to what you and John and Chris and have been talking about on the show for the past couple of weeks, which is to stop just cheerleading everything and start to take like a more active role in the whole situation and have conversations that we weren't having before. And the conversation we need to have is, why are we allowing the federal government just to spend billions of dollars whenever it feels like it? Like, it has no right to do that. The federal government should be constantly on its knees begging for our approval, like seeking our approval, not doing whatever it wants and then kicking us in the face whenever we ask questions. So that's the conversation that should be happening right now. Not cheerleading for television characters, including Amy Coney Barrett.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this in a lot of different contexts on a lot of different shows lately. I feel like there's been a little bit of tension between like the general truth community and aspects of the Q community, because I do think that they intersect, but they're not always the same. I always caveat this by saying I'm a big fan of the Eye of the Storm guys. I talk to them a lot. I don't include them in this. I think that they're pretty sober with how they, engage with the plan and everything. But I think that we've absolutely seen at the advent of Trump 2.0, the word that I've been using is toxic positivity. It kind of was, it's a term that came out of the culture war, kind of as a reaction to the reaction to people getting pissed about the cultural subversion taking over Hollywood. So you had Gamergate, and you had people being like, can you stop making everything gay? Can you stop ruining all of our IP and our American culture? And then you started having people reacting to that and basically defending everything as good no matter what all the time. And people started calling that toxic positivity. And I think that the way I try to square these two things, because I do think that they can be squared, is that I think the Q drops were legit. I think that they were a part of a military operation. I don't think it's an Operation Trust thing. I've gone down those cognitive rabbit holes. It doesn't work for me. I can't square it as being something that made sense for the establishment to do. But if the drops were legit and representative of this military plan and that Trump is a part of, and if Trump is serious about what you're talking about, which is downsizing the federal government, returning power back to the American people, the drops were always extremely clear about that being a two-way street and a two-way process. John talks about the devolution sandwich in the context of this show. And to your point about whether it's the Supreme Court, the IRS, whatever we're talking about, if you're attacking people because they're criticizing the administrative state because you think that they're being negative, that's probably not the takeaway that the drops wanted you to come away with, right? Like, to me, an extreme version of this would be like getting mad at somebody for red-pilling people about how evil the Epstein operation is because you believe it's ultimately going to have a positive resolution. You can believe there's going to be a positive resolution, but that positive resolution comes on the back of a public mandate that you are responsible for engendering and pushing in that direction. And, oh, by the way, you could be wrong about your interpretation of the plan, of what specific things of the plan are.
Which would make you evil, by the way. That the definition of evil is people who stand by and allow evil to occur. It's like that by proxy, you are then evil if you are allowing evil to unfold in front of you and even defending it. So you have to be careful with this kind of stuff. Unless you know for certain, which none of us can, how can you possibly know for certain? You should always keep alternative possibilities in the back of your mind.
Right.
And we've talked about this a few times at the previous GARTs, and I've talked about it on my shows. We really are going to, hopefully, if this is done correctly and we achieve what I think we're setting out to achieve, a fundamental transformation of our mind, of like our zeitgeist, the way we view things. And what that means is abandoning what you think you know about the world and abandoning all of these paradigms and all of these ideas that have been forced upon you by the public school system and the status quo. For example, before the Civil War, people did not call themselves Americans. They called themselves, like, you would be a Massachusettsian. I don't even know what y'all call yourself, but a guy from Massachusetts. You'd be a Bostonian, right?
Yeah.
I would be a Virginian. If I went to France, they'd say, "Where are you from?" I'm from Virginia.
Right.
What are you? I'm a Virginian. It wasn't until after the Civil War where there was this groundswell of nationalism and the nationalist movement, which was worldwide. It was in Europe. It was everywhere. That's when people started to identify themselves as Americans. Now, we can debate whether that is a net positive or net negative, but the idea of an income tax, I saw someone in the chat say that we've been doing this for over 200 years. No, the modern income tax was imposed after World War II. It's been about less than 80 years we've been paying income tax.
It was temporary, Ghost.
Yeah, temporary. The whole thing. They did it once after World War I. Only the richest people paid it. It was like a test run, and it only was for a few years. And then once the debt was paid off, they repealed it. And then after World War II, they said, you know what? Everyone's going to pay income tax this time. And it never went away. And then it got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And I mean, you hear what Democrats talk about all the time, raising the income tax, people paying their fair share. And what do? They take the money and they send it to guys like Epstein, basically.
Trannies in Somalia or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, pay your fair share.
Stuff that Trump was listing at the State of the Union last night. He was listing out all the stuff. I mean,
it makes you've set me up perfectly. I didn't know if I was going to bring this up tonight, but it's absolutely perfect. This seems to work when I press this button, and then I press this button. So that's the hack I've figured out because I'm a super tech genius. So anyway, what you're talking about downsizing the federal government, but about Trump's deployments, even about the idea of Americans and states and all this kind of stuff. I was really interested in the way this writer, shout out to Bruce Abramson at Real Clear Wire, was talking about specifically through the lens of Doge, but largely Trump 2.0. I had never heard this term. I'm sure a lot of maybe there's people in accounting that have heard of this term, but they're saying Elon Musk Doge is zero basing the federal government, zero basing. So I'd never heard this term, but kind of explains it here. As a general rule, most organizations, businesses, agencies, and even households building a budget start by asking themselves a simple question. What did we spend last year? To answer, they compile a list of expense categories and the amount spent in each one. Next, they look ahead to the coming year to see which categories will require a bump up and where they can cut. Finally, they look at projected revenues and see where they can expect to cover planned spending. In such a process, last year's budget serves as the baseline for this year's budget. That's a perfectly reasonable approach if the goal is performance more or less on par with last year's. An entity displeased with past performance and contemplating major reforms must take a radically different approach. Zero-based budgeting rejects using last year's budget as a baseline. Instead, it sets the baseline for each category at zero. It then considers each contemplated expenditure, one at a time, and asks whether current circumstances can justify it or require it. If so, it gets added to the budget. If not, it's rejected. So I thought that this was a great take by Abramson because he's talking about an accounting, philosophy. But man, if that isn't what is going on in Trump 2.0, then I don't know what is. If you're looking at one underlying strategy, it's zero basing. Instead of coming into 2025 and saying, okay, here's what's going on with the government and here's what we have, here's what we're already spending, so let's look for some efficiencies. They have to do some of that legally, right? They can't just throw the entire budget out overnight, unfortunately. But the philosophical approach seems to be zero basing. It seems to be what Elon is bringing in and saying, what do we actually need for the government to function? And then what does not meet that criteria? Rather than looking at what do we have and how much of that is needed. Like those sound like the same thing, but the household budget idea is an interesting way to think about it because we've all done that. And, how easy is it to just be like, oh, well, Netflix is part of the budget or this thing is part of the budget. We've been doing it, so that's just part of the budget. Let's look for some surplus or whatever that we can cut, where the best way to build a household budget would be, what do we need? And start building a budget that way. And then I would add on to it by saying the zero basing philosophy can be applied to what you're talking about when it comes to the government itself, which was the original idea of the states. If you get budget and everything out of the way, instead of thinking, how many of the things we currently have in government do we need? You should start with baseline and say, let's assume we don't need a government, and then build up from there.
Yeah. Yeah. And it goes right back to what I was just saying about fundamentally transforming the way you view these things, putting new glasses on and looking at the lens. And when you put the right glasses on and you look at the IRS and you look at what these people are demanding from us, where they're demanding our money, they're saying, you better give us that money back, Trump. These people are gangsters. They're no different than the guys who walk into the laundromat with baseball bats and start breaking things and saying, hey, it'd be a shame if you didn't give us the protection money that we asked for. If someone's going to come in here and burn your place down, like that's effectively what these people are doing. It's a shakedown. And these people are gangsters. They are literally criminals. And if you start thinking about them as criminals engaging in criminal enterprise and very, very aggressive, ruthless, just despicable criminal enterprise, it really changes the way that you look at the entire government and the entire system. And it really makes you feel like paying into that is an act of immoral degeneracy.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I would just correct one thing you said when you're talking about, breaking people's legs with baseball bats. If Italians do it, it's gangsterism, it's pure criminality. When good Irish boys do it, they're just cleaning up the neighborhood and keeping the neighborhood in order, okay? There's a subtle difference there, but yeah, when Guineas do it, it's a totally different thing. I mean,
well
zero
said.
basing, new term to add to the lexicon. I always love that. I love the Bruce Lee approach. You see something out there in the info war, something somebody's talking about, some sort of vocabulary, a cipher, just take it, put it in your toolbox, and start seeing if it applies to other things you're looking at. The meat of what we wanted to talk about tonight deals with the art of the deal. There's a lot of deal making, wheeling and dealing going on all over the game board. Ghost is going to spurg out about the Middle East like he does. But to lead him up to that, I guess I'll start with the closest geographically deal making that we've got going on right now. And also, to me, the funniest. We've got will they, won't they dance of the U.S., Canada, Mexico tariffs. This started, you had Howard Lutnick go out yesterday and say, actually, they might be delayed on Wednesday. Then some of them were delayed on Wednesday. Now some of them are going on and reciprocal tariffs are going on, but auto tariffs are going off. But to me, I found this statement by Donald Trump about Justin Trudeau today to be absolutely fascinating. So Trump says, Justin Trudeau of Canada called me to ask what could be done about tariffs. I told him that many people have died from fentanyl that came through the borders of Canada and Mexico, and nothing has convinced me that it has stopped. He said it's gotten better, but I said that's not good enough. The call ended in a somewhat friendly manner. He was unable to tell me when the Canadian election is taking place, which made me curious, like, what's going on here? I then realized he's trying to use this issue to stay in power. Good luck, Justin.
Wow.
So, man, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, Zelensky comes to mind, who canceled the election and refuses to hold a new one. He basically just called Justin Trudeau illegitimate, which he recently did to Zelensky as well. He called him a dictator.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of my big themes this week that we'll get into more and as we continue this topic, but it's kind of the Western hegemon, which me and Ghost talk about quite a bit. Chris talks about that quite a bit. Man, Justin Trudeau, Trump tells you right there. One of the truth posts that I'd put out about that was the inversion of the globalist Western hegemon continues unabated. Trump isn't refusing to deal with Justin Trudeau because of some political rivalry. It's because he, Trudeau, is an illegitimate leader. So, I think that there's multiple layers going on in this negotiation with Canada, but I think that that's one of the biggest ones that Trump kind of finally pulled the mask down on. John and I were talking about this a month ago, saying, hey, Trump is gearing a lot of his deployments toward Canada to the Canadian people and saying, hey, you should be demanding more of your government. And now he's doubling down and saying, like, hey, didn't Trudeau lose a no confidence vote? Isn't he technically, we all know publicly, unfit to be the leader of Canada right now, according to their own parliamentary system? And yet they don't have an election on the books. Nothing has been decided, as far as I'm aware, about an interim prime minister, however they do crap up there. And to me, that seems to be one of the main things that Trump is really doing here, is saying, Trudeau, the reason I'm not taking Trudeau seriously is because he's basically unfit to treat with me and the U.S. because he's not the legitimately elected leader of the Canadian people.
Yeah, that's it's pretty base. It's actually very base when you stop and think about it. Share my screen. I'll explain the tariff situation. So this is what's called the global North and the global South. So basically, ever since the end of World War II, we have the rules-based international order that has emerged, which is the polite way of saying globalism, the polite way of saying the Western hegemony, which is the oligarchy that rules the world. And so they've divided the world into two different sectors. They have what's called the global North, really it's the global South. The global South is everyone who wasn't a primary player in World War II. And the global North are the primary players in World War II who became the power, the superpowers of the world after World War II. So you'll notice that it includes Russia. Russia has defected from the global north and has basically joined the global south and the alliance. A lot of that is because we have pushed them out. And when Putin came into power in the year 2000, he tried to make friends with us, and the Bushes told him to pound sand. And he told Oliver Stone that George Bush Sr., while his son was president, was the one who told him to pound sand. So what they've done is they've set up two different systems. The countries in the blue is the tax farm. That's the tax plantation. So that's where they extract the wealth from. All right. The countries in the red, that's the slave plantation. That's where they make the cheap goods using slave labor. So they make cheap goods in the areas in red, and then they import those goods with no trade barrier to the areas in blue and flood the markets with cheap goods so that you can't go manufacture and sell them at a better price, and so you can't compete. So you're then forced to work for them, and their corporations work for them as their drone. And then when you get the paycheck from them, you then have to give a very large percentage of that back to them in the form of taxation. That's the plantation that the entire world exists on. And when you put tariffs up, you break this system, because then manufacturing is forced to come home. America is forced to manufacture for Americans. India manufactures for Indians, so on and so forth. And that's the system. That's what they're fighting against. That's what they are so apoplectic about, is breaking this system where you have the system of extracting wealth in the blue and the slave caste in the red. So it's good for everybody. It's good for the entire world.
Absolutely. This is a great way to visualize, like Ghost said, add Russia to the red here. This is a great way to visualize the beginnings of the Sovereign Alliance, the incentive structures. The BRICS nations are obviously included here, if you include Russia. And I would just add a little bit of color to what you said, is that understanding how the global north got the global south into this situation until recent years where things are turning around is twofold. So on the back of World War II, the United States was a global superpower, a true superpower, military superpower. It was its true coming into its own moment where all of the advantages of the American system coalesced. That includes geographic advantages of being separated from the bulk of the war, the manufacturing base, the economic capitalism. There was interference, obviously, in the teens and 20s in the U.S., but overall, compared to most of the world, we had this very free market capitalist system. So our dollar was the strongest, our manufacturing base was the strongest, our people were the strongest, etc. Our military was the strongest. So after World War II, when Ghost says the rules-based international order, well, it was NATO and globalists that came up with the rules, but it was the United States that enforced the rules, because as we know, a rule only matters if it's enforced, right? A consequence only matters if it's delivered. Otherwise, nobody really cares. There's a reason nobody cares right now when anybody in Brussels says anything, because they have no power projection. The reason that even 10 years ago, people cared very much what harpies in Brussels said about their little nation state, because they knew that Brussels was going to be able to leverage the power of the U.S. military-industrial complex, and barring that, the U.S. clandestine apparatus, which includes the CIA, in order to leverage kinetic power projection, right? So they would start by leveraging the petrodollar, and all these nations would have to trade using the petrodollar. And if you were Saddam Hussein or Muammar Gaddafi, or pick your leader, and you tried to go off of the petrodollar, well, then they hit you with consequence number 2, which, as we've seen infamously with Hillary Clinton, is we came, we saw, he died. That's consequence 2. And you've covered this quite a bit in your various shows. So I think people look at the global north and the global south, they look at the Western hegemon and then the emerging BRICS alliance, and they're like, man, why all of a sudden is this common sense sort of approach to international trade and sovereignty taking over? Why wasn't this emerging before? And it's a good question, but the reason is those people would be killed by the United States. And if you want to cue the "we're the baddies" meme, you can cue "we're the baddies" meme. Because what would happen is American soldiers, the American military, would be sold a story, and the American people would be sold that story, and the regime change would be entirely justified. And what regime change is all about is, when Ghost pulls up that map, regime change is about keeping the blue blue and the red blue. It's about getting everything to be part of the rules-based international order. And then, in keeping with this show, the Devolution Power Hour, I've been saying for years now, from the special military operation in the Donbass to everything we're seeing in the global south emerge, and especially a lot of the stuff that you cover, none of it is possible without Donald Trump's devolution operation. Because even though Russia has a strong military, it's not the U.S. military. And if the U.S. military was under the control of the globalist oligarchy, you bet your ass that there would have been military U.S. troops on the ground in the Donbass in 2022 if Trump didn't have control of the U.S. military.
100%. And they absolutely nailed it. And to bring it full circle, Muammar Gaddafi was brutally murdered in 2011.
On
camera. His castle was surrounded. He called Hillary Clinton by ISIS. And he called Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State, and said, like, I surrender. What do you want to do? And Hillary said, all right, if you surrender, come out and we will let you live. And he came out, and then they live streamed it to the internet, chopped his body up, dragged it around the city, lit it on fire, just completely mangled him on camera. And then Hillary Clinton went on 60 Minutes and laughed about it and said that was awesome. Yeah. That operation, and you can go look this up, go to your favorite AI and ask it, and it will tell you this, represented the first operation that NATO ever did in Africa. And the pretense to that operation was a news story by Al Jazeera that said that Gaddafi was giving his soldiers Viagra and telling them to rape women in villages around Libya, which was later proven to be completely false and made up. So that is what NATO is. That's what NATO represents, and it now operates on pretty much every continent. They're talking about, by the way, going after China with NATO now. So NATO is the bad guy. NATO is evil, and it only is just one facet of a much larger Leviathan that Trump is up against and that we all collectively are up against.
Yeah, and I often say that you can't end your InfoWar analysis by playing the opposite game, but you can definitely start the analysis by playing the opposite game. And it turns out that if you've been lied to about most everything, and you wouldn't be watching a show like this if you didn't think you'd been being lied to by the central narrative, you've got to apply that to the foundations of the stories you've been told as Americans. And it does get complicated. I mean, we spend a lot of time digging into this stuff, and it's very difficult. We go back and forth behind the scenes all the time of various players on the game board, various time periods on the game board, and say, man, was this guy anti-regime? Was this guy a regime puppet who then ran afoul of the regime? It can be difficult to tell. One of my, to me, one of the most interesting deep dives I've gone on in recent years was about China, because trying to square it by saying, okay, it seems like China has been leveraged by the by the globalist oligarchy against sovereigns for quite a long time. But then it also seems like Xi Jinping is part of this emergent sovereign alliance. And I think that you can basically apply to them what you apply to us. Nobody in this audience has any difficulty understanding that circa 2015, the United States was basically operating on behalf of a globalist regime. So many of the things that the United States was involved in 2016 and before were regime ops. Well, you can apply that to China circa 2012 and before. And then you can start to see how it started to bifurcate in 2013. And then, as we've been talking about for years on this show, there's probably some gray area overlap, whereas the globalist deep state factions within a specific nation rebel against the incoming patriot or sovereign movement, you're going to get this gray area period of time where you've got clandestine operations being run by Americans while you've got patriot white hat operations being run by the same, right? But it seems like people sometimes have a hard time applying that to theaters like Russia or like China and saying, man, this Russian oligarch seems pretty bad. But I heard, Burning Brighter ghosts say that Russia was part of the Sovereign Alliance. It's like, okay, well, now take a look at whether or not that Russian oligarch is allowed in Russia. And that's one of your easy indicators there of trying to put this stuff together. But it can be complicated.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and just look at it from this perspective. If you lived in some random country and your only access to America and understanding America was the internet, and all you saw about America was Hollywood, the Oscars, reality television, the stuff on the news. I mean, your perspective of America would be pretty awful. Like, you would look at America and be like, wow, everyone in America is a tranny. Everyone in America is insane. They're all like on antidepressants and, have guns and just kill people. Like, you would look at America and think it's a third world country, right? So we can play these games all day, but it's all about what's the lens that they're letting you see these other countries through. And you're probably only seeing one facet of what the actual country is. And Chris Paul says the good twin, evil twin of every country. That's definitely true. But when it comes to especially Russia is the largest country in the world, the most ethnically diverse naturally in the world. And it has a history that is absolutely beyond tragic. There's no history in the world that is more tragic than the history of the Russian people. And that's what we're watching play out. So,
yeah, man, that's in part 1 of the Righteous Russia series. That's really what, it started going down that rabbit hole, inspired by the drops and inspired by some of my own experiences. I've talked about training with Russians and seeing them as humans in a way that a lot of Americans didn't at the time. But it was deep diving into that Russian history that really will Russia pill you. And that's why I don't think you and I were on a show together about this, but a few weeks ago when Trump put out that truth post talking about Russian history and shared history with the US, that was one of my favorite statements I've ever seen him make. Not just because I agree with it, but because those are those occasional signals that Trump puts out that he understands exactly what we've been talking about, and that we're not just seeing ghosts, no pun intended. We're not just seeing figments of our imagination when we're trying to put together this idea of a long-term alliance at play, a long-term story that's been playing out. So when Trump references the tragedies that the Russian people have suffered, and that they're actually not very different from Americans, and we should be the greatest of allies. That was literally the entire premise of the Righteous Russia series, of saying, hey, it's worth considering that the stories that we've been told forever, dating back to the early 20th century, but accelerating throughout the Cold War era, etc., about Russia, were designed entirely to keep the two most ideologically aligned nations and powerful nations from joining together in the public narrative.
There's only one country that has had America's back in every single conflict we've ever been involved in, and that is Russia. No other country can say that. And it all started in the American Revolution when the London bankers, who are the true enemies in the American Revolution, tried to shut down maritime trade. They basically said, we're going to go after every American ship around the world and we're going to sink it, any American ship. And it was the Russian Navy, Catherine the Great, who stood up and said, absolutely not. We, the Russian Navy, are going to secure the waterways for American ships. And they protected us because we did not have a Navy at that point. We formed the Navy, but we had only a handful of ships. And that's why George Washington said, we're going to fight a land-based war. We're not going to do a naval war in the American Revolution. But it was the Russian Navy who had our back. So they are our greatest ally historically, and we need to remember that. But the people, the Kagans, the Victoria Nulands, The State Department folks do not want you to know that.
Yep. And as we say around these parts, and it's the famous Qism, the choice to know will be yours. And I think Ghost and I were talking about this before the show a little bit. I think that the public narrative is, you're seeing the very beginnings of it. It is going to coalesce around the peacemakers, Trump and Putin. So I want to transition us into that. We are seeing, if you have the eyes to see it and the ears to hear it, you can see the story of the peacemakers being actualized long before it is finalized. Long before, your favorite conning influencer gets social permission to start saying that Vladimir Putin is not only not evil, but is working with Donald Trump to restore world peace, or to create it for the first time ever, maybe. You can see these things happening now. And I know you were reading about this today. So before we get to the Russia side of the equation of the peacemakers, let's look at the Trump side, which is this mineral rights deal, etc., the resources deal, Trump and Ukraine. How do you see the tit for tat going on with the Trump-Ukraine situation ever since last Friday?
This is like I sent the meme to you, but this is like the Darth Vader meme of I'm altering the terms of the deal. Pray I don't alter it further. And yeah, I mean, obviously Zelensky did not read the art of the deal before he went and met with Trump, and that was a very foolish decision on his part. But if he had, he would have known that Trump says the first deal I offer you is the best deal. Not all the time. I bet there were a few exceptions in the book where he provided some exceptions, but 95% of the time, the first deal he offers you is the best deal. And if you walk away from the table, when you come back, you're going to get a worse deal. And every time you walk away and come back, he alters the terms of the deal and you get less. And so not only did Zelensky walk away from the table, he threatened America. Remember the veiled threat of, you will soon feel the pain. And that's when Trump said, absolutely not. Don't tell us what we're going to feel. He muttered supa under his breath, which is Ukrainian for bitch, to J.D. Vance. And he also just disrespected the Oval Office, like in that whole display. So those reasons, on top of the fact that he walked away from the table, I wrote about it in the brief last week that when he comes back, there's no way Trump's giving him the same deal. Trump's definitely going to rug pull him and make the deal worse.
Yeah. And the Zelensky stuff is a personal favorite theater of mine. I've been writing about it like a madman the last week. I am a believer, if not the progenitor, of the Arboise theory. I think that it takes two to make a perfect phone call. Probably talk that to death. I actually think that you can see signals of that here. Now, the beautiful thing about this Ukraine deployment is that it doesn't need to be the case that we have control over Volodymyr Zelensky, right? This is the beauty of the art of the deal. What Ghost is talking about is apt. I think that's the point of it. Trump's in this deal-making stage. But when people can ask, like, what, how are you determining what you think of the various loyalties on the game board of some of these characters? To me, it's the net effects. It's very simple, very first principles based. Was Zelensky's visit and row in the White House on Friday good or bad for Ukraine? Obviously, it was bad. It was very obviously bad before it happened, while it happened, and after it happened. And then secondly, and I think more to the point, if we all understand and acknowledge that Ukraine is a proxy state, it's a Prussian proxy state of the globalist regime, was what Zelensky did there good for them? I know some people are arguing that it is because they want war. I would submit that it was not, because as we mentioned earlier in the show, the Western hegemon without the United States and the US military is completely toothless and completely feckless in the current theater. Even their sanctions are completely toothless because of the global South explanation that you gave. Russia is basically protected by the economic armor of the global South and the multipolar world order that Xi Jinping is largely seen as the mastermind behind. Narendra Modi is certainly a part of that as well. But when you look at Zelensky, wherever you think his loyalties lie, one of the things that I had said at the time, I'd written this on Saturday, and I'm not saying we've seen it yet, but I think we're seeing it start to map. I said, I would submit that the only thing better than the firestorm that consumed the globalist media in the wake of Trump's drubbing of Zelensky would be the one that results from our boy Z agreeing to a peace deal his masters did not, and coming back to Trump with his tail tucked firmly between his legs before doing so. In other words, from where I'm sitting, the humiliation ritual on display isn't of Zelensky or Ukraine, but of the globalist class both represent. So I wonder what you think of where we're going with the Ukraine narrative, but that's my prediction out on the table, is that Zelensky will come back to the table with his tail tucked between his legs, and that him doing so will be met with criticism by the globalists that are supposedly controlling him.
Yeah, exactly. And I love the concept. I think it's a lot of fun to play with, and like the idea of Zelensky being an actor, because he literally is an actor. But yeah, like what would the purpose of him of doing that be? And to your point, it's telling a story in order to rug pull the people who think that they're in control of Zelensky, and maybe they really are, but it doesn't. But to your point, it doesn't matter either way. The way that it's played out, that's the beauty of game theory, is that whether they're controlling him through direct action or they're controlling him through manipulation, it's still the same net effect. And you can game that out if you understand your enemy, and that's what Sun Tzu says you're supposed to do: is understand your enemy, get inside his head, and then you can control it.
That's exactly, and it's so simple, but I do think people get lost in the sauce there when you're playing white hat, black hat games. People assign good and evil to white hats and black hats, but really this is a leverage game. And, if you understand that, to Ghost's point, what is Zelensky's situation? Let's say he's not a white hat. He's not playing a role completely. Let's say he's just an independent actor in this situation, no pun intended there. He's the fake president of a fake country. We literally know his globalist masters, many of them have been arrested. He's sandwiched between the US empire and the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation is over his doorstep and is in his lands, and he has nothing he can do to stop them. And the US is not backing him at all. The only people he could appeal to is Europe and NATO, and we've kind of seen how that's gone. They're bloviating and everything, and maybe we can talk about that. But if you were Zelensky and Europe and NATO are pressuring you to escalate the situation with Russia, the reason you wouldn't do that is because you know what the end game is there. And you know that even if you're not, a Trump loyalist or whatever, you're unlikely to have a good outcome with the backing of globalists than you are by coming to the table between the winning side, which is probably going to be Trump and Putin.
Yeah. And I mean, the question that's begged and that really needs to be discussed and hashed out in the public square is, why are these oligarchs who have everything, who are in charge, they are the kings, right? The kings, they are the rulers of the world. Why are they prepared to destroy themselves in order to defend this backwater country, the Ukraine, which literally means borderlands in Russian? And the reason, of course, is because it is the central hub of a giant worldwide organized crime syndicate where they are trafficking children, trafficking people, trafficking organs, trafficking guns, trafficking everything. And that's a crime scene. And Putin went in there to get the crime scene and get control of it. And Victoria Nuland effectively admitted that to Marco Rubio last year, or 2 years ago, maybe it was now, where she said, oh, yeah, we are actually funding secret bioweapons labs in Ukraine that none of you know about. And, oh, yeah, by the way, that's Metabiota. That's Hunter Biden. That is George Soros. Yeah, that's the U.S. government. So, and then, of course, the concern was from her, what if the Russians get their hands on this stuff? It's like, well, yeah, what if the Russians do get their hands on this stuff? How wonderful would that be? Because then at least they're going to want to show it to the world. Look what the U.S. has been doing. And this is where people, I think, get tripped up in the Djangoism. And if you don't know what Djangoism means, it basically is like using nationalism to trick people into supporting bad ideas. Like, hey,
Bush era is the perfect American example of it.
Like, let's go kill these people in a foreign land because we're America and because of course we can. Like, as might makes right, and we have the ability to do it. So why shouldn't we go kill them? Even though you've never met them, you know nothing about them, and the television is the only reason that you have this idea in your head. And so people get confused by this. Well, wait a minute. Like, should we allow as Americans Russia to push us around, or anyone to push us around? And the question really is, well, why the hell are we over there in the first place? Like, why do we have secret bioweapons labs in Ukraine on the border, just miles from Russia? I mean, imagine if Russia had bioweapons labs in Mexico. So this is all stuff that needs to be adjudicated and needs to be dragged out into the public. But that, I think, when you take that concept, even if you don't accept it, take the idea and consider it as you look at these news stories that we're going to look at, and it kind of begins to make sense. Common sense takes over, and you're like, okay, this is why they're prepared to destroy themselves. Not just the U.S. oligarchs, but the European oligarchs.
Absolutely. And yeah, I think one of the things I've said in my writing quite a bit is Ukraine is this keystone. You called it the borderlands. Russians call it the borderlands. It's this keystone, it's this playground, and that means that there's a lot of leverage there. And whoever leverages the proxy president, it's one of the ironies of people that have a hard time squaring the theory of our boy Z. They're like, but he's a puppet. He's a regime puppet. Well, yes, that means that this is a man who not only can be leveraged, his job is to be leveraged. He is a professional leveragee. Like, the man was literally groomed to be a proxy president. And all you have to do is just swap out the incentive structure and the control apparatus above him. And there are a lot of indicators that this is happening. I don't just say our boy Z because I think his net effects are positive. I think that that's an indicator. There's some actuals here. Ihor Kolomoisky was the Ukrainian oligarch, globalist oligarch, who funded Zelensky's rise, produced the Hero of the People TV series that basically brought Zelensky into international prominence and basically disguised him as the Ukrainian Obama, or even the Ukrainian Trump, really, somebody who was looking to root out corruption. That was his fictional character in this Ukrainian television series. That's the character he played as Ukrainian president. And then, of course, the rest is history. Martial law, no elections, sending his people supposedly into this meat grinder against Russia. Ihor Kolomoisky was arrested by Zelensky's administration and is currently in prison. The oligarch who put him into power. There have been at least 2 federal judges, the equivalent of Supreme Court justices, arrested in an anti-corruption purge by Zelensky's administration. Many members of the military, etc. And then one of my favorite bits of counter-signal here is the frequent trend of Azov battalion loyalists in Ukrainian politics sharply criticizing everything Zelensky does because he has been devastating to the Azov battalion. So you've got Vitaly Klitschko here. He's the mayor of Kyiv. He's former heavyweight world boxing champion as well. Lots of Ukrainian boxers. So I was familiar with him in the combat sports world. But Kyiv mayor feuds with Zelensky in schism over martial law. The mayor, Vitaly Klitschko, who has had a tense relationship with Zelensky, accused him of trying to usurp the powers of elected officials in the capital. So it's not just Trump and our politicians calling Zelensky a dictator. Ukrainian Azov-aligned loyalists are calling him a dictator. And when you see the net effects on the Azov battalion, it just makes you start to wonder. Klitschko's been calling for his ouster for 2 years now, and for some reason, they just can't get him out of there.
Kolomoisky created the Azov Battalion in 2014, fully funded. And he also had his Ukrainian citizenship stripped by Zelensky. And the reason for that, the legal justification, was that he had tri-citizenship. You've heard of dual citizenship. He has tri-citizenship with Israel, Cyprus, and Ukraine. And what's, I guess, known or commonly done is you can go to Cyprus and you can pay a lot of money and get your citizenship automatically. And so people will, like billionaires will do that, and then they use their Cypriot citizenship to launder money, and do all kinds of other nefarious stuff, which is interesting because Trump now is talking about the gold card. I don't know if you've heard him talk about this, but you pay like whatever it is, $5 million, and you automatically get U.S. citizenship. And whether Trump's serious about doing that or not, like, I don't know, but it certainly begs the question, well, why would you just let oligarchs do that? Like, why would you let rich people just buy their way into our country? Well, that's what Cyprus does. That's why people become Cypriot citizens. So these are conversations that need to happen. These are public conversations that absolutely need to happen. And it's all connected to the main headlines in the news, Ukraine and Israel.
You probably would liked, if you didn't see it, this headline from the Financial Times. The U.S. cuts off intelligence sharing with Ukraine, just because, to me, this is one of those great devolution plan bicameral headlines where you can look at this and say, art of the deal, cutting off intelligence sharing, or the way it hit me is for years we've been talking about, well, the media used to admit freely the CIA were the ones over there training the Azov battalion. The CIA were the ones aiding and abetting them in the overthrow of the Russian loyalists in 2014 and that orchestrated the Maidan coup. So when Trump cuts off intelligence sharing with Ukraine, what are we to take away from this headline? Who is he cutting off intelligence sharing with?
Yeah, and just to really put a point on that, if you would share my screen, here is Lindsey Graham, John McCain, and I think that's is that
Klobuchar?
Klobuchar, yeah, Klobuchar in Ukraine in 2017 with the troops. Are these guys Azov battalion? I don't know if these are. I think they might
probably
be
all dead now.
It's Poroshenko with them. Yeah, and basically saying we're going to go fight Russia. We're going to go get Putin. So, yeah, this has our fingerprints all over it. And unfortunately, when the history of this era is written by the world, the U.S. government is going to be the bad guy. And not just because of this, but because of a lot of other things. All the people that you've been told your whole life are the bad guys. We actually created most of those people. We created most of those monsters because of the Hegelian dialectic, which you talk about all the time.
Yeah, well said. And before we get on to maybe our last kind of couple of topics here, I did want to just show people, how's it going for the globalist Western oligarchy that we talk about? And this is where Emmanuel Macron is at this week. He is even making waves in Europe. Oh, looks like that's not working. He's even making waves in Europe by getting pretty hawkish. So he says, we are entering a new era. If a country can invade its neighbor in Europe and go unpunished, nobody can be sure of anything. Beyond Ukraine, the Russian threat is real. It affects European countries. President Putin is violating our borders to assassinate opponents and manipulate elections. We need to prepare. I want to believe that the U.S. will stand by our side, but we have to be ready for that not to be the case. France has to recognize its special status. We have the most efficient, effective army in Europe, adding that France also has nuclear weapons to provide the broader Western alliance if called upon. So, man, I mean, I think this says two things. Number one, Europe knows that Trump is not bluffing. Macron knows that Trump is aligned with Putin. They know that these aren't new talks that we're talking about here. They know the sovereign alliance is a real thing. Now we're seeing their posture shift toward a more hawkish posture. But how do you see statements like that? Do you think it's all bark and no bite? Do you think that these European leaders are actually looking to see if they can get the public mandate for some sort of kinetic action?
Yeah, it seems to me like they're trying to lean into Trump's idea of, hey, everyone should be paying for their fair share. Everyone should be, peace through strength. By having a big, strong military, you're going to become a more powerful nation, a more self-reliant nation, which at the nation state level is a very true statement and idea. The problem is that we're talking about a regional governing authority, the EU, which was only created in 1993, and it was created by documents that were written by the International Bank of Settlement back in the 1940s. as a post-war organization for the Third Reich, and everything right down to the euro, to the economic zone, lowering trade barriers, meaning eliminating all tariffs across Europe so that you can do the stuff we were talking about earlier. That's what created the EU in 1993. If you share my screen, this headline I think will make people laugh. To that point, Keir Starmer, this is the British Prime Minister, increased military spending will make Brits richer. And I just want everyone who is of a certain age to think about the past 25 years and the however many trillions, tens of trillions of dollars we've spent on foreign wars. How much richer did it make you as an American? And here's this clown telling his people, you are going about to be super rich because we're going to basically raise your taxes to fund a new military industrial complex in Britain because they can no longer rely on the American military industrial complex.
Yeah, it's hilarious because not only are we seeing out of France and the UK escalation of rhetoric, at an absolute baseline, the narrative deployments out of Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are steeped around peace, and the narrative deployments out of the UK and France are entirely the opposite. They want peace through war, right? But secondly, when you're bringing up this military spending thing, I kind of had this thought a couple of nights ago. Trump, I was thinking of it through the context of Canada, but it applies maybe even more so to what we're seeing in France and the UK. Trump is so in these people's heads that in order to own the orange man, they are becoming hawkish nationalists, right? So in order to combat the rise of nationalism and sovereignty that Donald Trump espouses, the UK and France are talking about strengthening their militaries, reducing reliance on the United States, and taking care of what they perceive as their own problems. So even if they do this, we get to the point where we're going, this is literally what Trump wants you to do. So even in the Canada example, when you see viral videos of Canadians throwing away Jack Daniel's bottles of bourbon, they are being nationalistic. They are acting as free sovereigns and pulling inward, which is what Trump wants. So it doesn't seem like a great plan if you're them.
Yeah, and then here's the shot and chaser here. This is the president of the European Union. The European Union, of course, is a undemocratic body. This is the body that's talking about defending democracy in Ukraine, and they have a president that is not elected, that is appointed by oligarchs. And so the plan is to increase defense spending by $840 billion, but they don't have the money for it. So what they're going to do is they're going to ask all of the nation states, the member states of the EU, to raise their taxes and to basically extract that wealth from the taxpayer, like we talked about before, to fund it, to make up the difference. So they're going to borrow the money, and the interest payments will be made by the European people. And so I think we're probably going to see an inflection point where the European people are going to have to decide, why the hell do we even have the EU? I think it's time to defect from that.
Absolutely. I fully agree that that's where we're moving toward, is this idea of the awakening will spread worldwide. Well, what's the awakening? Sovereignty, self-determination on an individual level and on a nation state level. To your point, the Europeans and the Canadians, they're de facto Europeans, they're in these globalist systems that we never were fully locked into. We were the police state of the globalist system. We were the foot soldiers of the globalist system, but these are the slave class of it. So, the way I'm seeing rhetoric out of Starmer and Macron is, how far are the French and British and German people going to allow these leaders to push them toward the precipice of a war with Russia? And I think there will be a limit to that. So I just want to get to basically one more macro topic with, I'll let Ghost spur out on the Middle East before we get out of here. But to transition us into the Middle East, if you want confirmation that Putin is also talking about peace, I thought it was absolutely fascinating that, here, let me get the original source here, that he is offering to broker peace talks with Iran on behalf of the United States. Putin agrees to help Trump broker nuclear talks with Iran. Russia agreed to assist U.S. President Trump's administration in communicating with Iran on issues including the Islamic Republic's nuclear program and its support for regional anti-U.S. proxies, according to people familiar with the situation. I think that that's interesting phrasing, anti-U.S. proxies. But, you know, from where I'm sitting, I'm sure you've got more on it. From a baseline normie perspective, you've got Trump very publicly last week trying to drive Zelensky and Ukraine to the negotiating table for peace with Russia, right? And then you've got Putin on the other side of the public narrative reciprocating by trying to drive Iran to the table with Trump. So there's a reason we call them peacemakers and not peace askers or peace pretty please with sugar on top. Could you bring please, right? Peacemakers make peace. And in order to make peace, you have to have the power projection and the relationships, which you can speak more to, in order to make that peace. So how did you see the Russia-Iran deployment? It definitely hit me with the sort of signal that we talk about a lot.
Oh, for sure. And so the two really interesting, important developments over the past 2 years, since October 7th, 2023, is the relationship between Russia and Iran, which was already well on its way to developing, has really cultivated and has peaked or reached its apex, I would say, with this security deal that they recently signed, where you have allegedly thousands of Russian soldiers in Iran, pilots, planes, missile defense systems, all sorts of things to bolster, reinforce Iran. You also have, more importantly, the relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which has been reconciled, and they've been enemies since 1979, since the Ayatollah came into power, since Iran went from being a pro-Western, normal, secular society to the radical Islamic state that it is now. And they've reconciled and they've made peace. And we saw, you may recall back in October that 2 weeks before the election, Netanyahu was threatening to bomb Iran, and the whole the narrative was that Netanyahu was going to get the U.S. into a war that Trump couldn't back out of once he got into office. And on the eve of when everyone thought this was going to happen, Saudi Arabia, or the Iranian Navy, came out and said, "Oh, we're actually in talks with the Saudi government to do joint naval exercises in the Persian Gulf." And then the very next day, the Saudi foreign ministry came out and said, "Oh, we actually already did those naval exercises. Those are done. We're now talking about doing a second naval exercise in the Red Sea." So that narrative deployment showed that the Saudis and the Iranians were already cooperating militarily, and Netanyahu was banking on the Arabs all backing Israel to go to war with Iran. That's what the neocons wanted out of the Abraham Accords. They wanted the Abraham Accords to turn the Arabs against the Iranians and start a Middle East war. So right now you have Bezalel Smotrich, the Israeli finance minister. He met with the the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, today to discuss economic ties. This guy is not liked at all around the world because he is a total zealot. He has openly said,
Greater Israel, right? He's one of the main Greater Israel.
Yes. He back in October in an interview for a documentary, he said that according to his belief structure, Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, parts of Saudi Arabia, and parts of Egypt are all part of Israel. It's just a matter of getting there militarily and conquering all that. He said Damascus will be ours. I suspect in the next week or two, if not maybe a little longer, we will see Israel take control of Damascus and try to annex it as part of Israel, I think, or at least have it as like a territory. So I think this is all aligning with that. So Smotrich is in the U.S. to talk about economic ties with Bessent, but the real reason he's here is he's trying to talk Trump into backing the annexation of the West Bank, which would mean taking Palestine and officially, formally making it part of Israel, erasing Palestine off the map. And that, of course, would mean World War III, because you would have all the Arabs, the $1 trillion that MBS promised us, gone. all the Arabs would go to war with Israel. Iran would go to war with Israel. China negotiated an oil deal with Iran last year, which now I think 60% of their oil comes from Iran. Now their economy is completely dependent on Iran. So they would back Iran in that. Russia, I just said, signed a security deal with Iran. They would back Iran. So it would be China, Russia, Iran, all the Arab countries, which are extremely rich, versus Israel. We would back Israel. Europe would probably would back Israel. That's East versus West. That's World War III. And basically, Smotrich, who has openly talked about starving all the Palestinians, he said they're all subhuman. Let's just starve them all. The West won't let us do it, but we should just starve them all. That's why he's not well liked around the world. Yeah, imagine that.
That little thing,
yeah. So he's here hoping to get Trump to come out and back the idea of just annexing Palestine and making it part of Israel. So ever since Trump came out and did the whole Gaza thing, I've said that immediately. I said, I don't believe him. I think this is all posturing. I think this is all art of the deal. If you would share my screen again. So this is from today, and this is from the Times of Israel. So this is like the state affiliated newspaper in Israel, basically. And this is Abbas. So Mahmoud Abbas is the Palestinian president, has been for about 30 years. And he says, or this is his top confidant. So like his Dan Scavino. He says, if Trump advances Gaza expulsion plan, the Palestinian Authority will cut ties with the U.S. However, he also says we are maintaining contact with the president because we don't think he's actually going to do this. We think he's just bluffing. We think this is all just rhetoric. And if we scroll all the way down, because it talks about how there's no way we're going to allow this if you forcibly remove these people from Gaza, like then our relationship is over. There's nothing more to talk about. He says, Trump has defended his idea, saying that Gaza is an uninhabitable demolition site. The question, and this is a quote, the question Mr. Trump should be asking is who destroyed Gaza and made it uninhabitable? He said, referring to Israel's 15-plus month bombardment of Gaza aimed at dismantling Hamas after October 7th onslaught. The problem is not the existence of the Palestinians in Gaza. The problem is the existence of Israel occupation in Gaza. So the goal should be to remove the occupation, not the Palestinians, he said, asserting that only a two-state solution will provide security and stability for Israel in the region. If Trump thinks there will be regional peace with Israeli normalization alongside the mass expulsion of Gaza's residents and the annexation of the West Bank, he is wrong. And he said, where is it? Well, sorry, I lost my spot, but
yeah, that's all right.
What they say is what he said is that he says this is what Trump said in his own words. This is a proposal, not a plan. He's now asked the Arabs to come out and give their own response. They met yesterday. The Arab League met in Cairo. They came back with a response. Trump rejected it, their counter proposal, because it didn't effectively, in Trump's words, remove Hamas's control of Gaza. And it's important for everyone to understand this. In 2017, after Trump came into office, Mahmoud Abbas, who represents a different political party, a different faction in their political system from Hamas, his political party was driven out of Gaza in 2006 by Hamas after they won their election. They picked up guns and they started shooting at him, drove him out of Gaza. He renegotiated in 2017 for Hamas to surrender control of that government in Gaza to Abbas. Abbas sent the prime minister into Gaza in an armed convoy to meet with the leaders of Hamas, and Hamas bombed the convoy and tried to kill the prime minister. In response to that, Abbas said, fine, we're going to cut off your funding. Y'all can all starve in Gaza, whatever. Like, I hope the people eat all of you alive. Didn't really say that, but that's basically what he meant. In response to that, Netanyahu, who was in power, said, hey, this is a great opportunity. We like Hamas because Hamas wants to fight. We want to fight the Palestinians. We should walk briefcases full of cash into Gaza and give them to Hamas. They ended up tens and tens of millions of dollars secretly given to Hamas in briefcases, kept them propped up, kept them afloat. And the only reason we know that, by the way, is because one of the ministers from Netanyahu's cabinet was so disgusted by the whole thing, he resigned and went public and blew the whistle on the operation and said, this is what happened. So point is that the Palestinian Authority, Abbas, has reached the same conclusions that I have, that Trump is not serious about any of this, and that they have faith that Trump's going to do it in good faith. At the same time, we now have the leader of the Shin Bet, and the Shin Bet is the counterterrorism intelligence service in Israel. The leader of the Shin Bet and Netanyahu are now in a narrative war with one another. They're both leaking intel from their offices, accusing one another of October 7th. Netanyahu is saying that the Shin Bet told him that Hamas was not a threat and was not going to attack. Shin Bet is telling the public that they warned him in May of 2023 that a war with Hamas was imminent and that he needed to do something about it. And so that's happening right now. You have some real infighting in Israel about pointing fingers. And then on top of that, you also have this story, Qatar. So Qatar is blasting Shin Bet as well, because the Shin Bet have come out and said that Hamas was funded. The entire October 7th attack was funded by Qatar. Well, the Qatar prime minister, it's worth noting that Trump is very good friends with the Qatar emir. They have a long relationship. We kind of went over it on the Book of Trump the other night. They came out and they said, wait a minute. Yes, we were giving money to Gaza, not to Hamas, but to the people of Gaza. But every single dollar that we gave to Gaza, you, Netanyahu, were involved in that, and you personally supervised it from 2018 till 2023, referring to the briefcases full of cash that were walked in by the Israelis. So the briefcases of cash coming from Qatar were walked in by the Israelis to Gaza, handed to Hamas, and that's what kept them afloat so that October 7th could happen. Huge scandal. This is basically 9/11 all over again in Israel, because 9/11, of course, was an inside job. Israel was probably involved in that too. Certainly was involved in it. But what we're watching here play out is we're watching these fracture lines between not only the Shin Bet and Netanyahu, but also Qatar and Israel. It's important to know that Qatar historically is a deep state hub in the Middle East. That's where CENTCOM is located. That's where the military industrial complex is located. A huge CIA base, a huge MI6 base, and basically all the people who retire from the CIA, they go and they form NGOs in Qatar, and then they get all the money from the Arab princes, all the oil money that fund these NGOs. So it's a huge CIA hotbed. It's a huge MI6 hotbed, military industrial complex. They have a really, really bad deep state, and that's obviously probably being thwarted, hopefully being thrown out. But you're watching that now turn on itself on the deep state in Israel. It's pretty interesting to watch play out while you have Smotrich in the U.S. trying to get us to go to war with Palestine.
Yeah, and this is, it's all a great explanation. It's why we've been talking about that. The word I've been using to describe this particular theater is the Kobayashi Maru. This is the impossible task, because it's so intertwined, not just politically, but culturally. It's world wars are intertwined in this region. Political, social, cultural, and religious ideologies are all intertwined here, and disinformation over the course of generations, etc. A lot of own goals over the decades that have been used to foment this kind of stuff, false flags, like you said. So I agree with the way you wrap that up, is that I don't know which way it's going to go in terms of like what's the final deal we have on the table here. I would assume it's going to resemble something like a two-state solution, or at least it's going to be a solution that Russia and the United States both agree on, essentially, because and the Saudis. And it feels like a lot of the infighting going on over there. What's hard to determine is how much of it is current and how much of it is almost being a disclosure operation to Israelis and even to people in that region, right? Like a lot of the scandals that we talk about from the American perspective over here, through the InfoWar lens, we're like, well, this is stuff that we've known about for a long time, and now it's just being disclosed. But we're not actually under threat in the U.S., or we don't think we are. We think that there's some Patriot control here. If you want to extend that over there, you can say maybe these factions are being exposed before the takedown occurs. And all along the way, Trump kind of plays the string out, will he, won't he, on either side of the divide, and kind of letting these people basically reveal themselves as much as possible. So the faith I have in it is that ultimately this doesn't end in World War. But to your point, we're seeing all across the game board the pieces that were being put in place by the other side in order to lay the groundwork for that great conflict between East and West. I don't think we're going to get that, but I think we're going to move toward that. And, right now the public narrative is like Ukraine with the US and Russia. But I think ultimately we're basically going to have the US, Russia, and the Saudis all having a sit-down moment very publicly where they get everybody in that region in line and say like, hey, this isn't just about Ukraine. This isn't just about us. This is about Israel. This is about Europe, just across the board.
Yeah. Yeah. And, the Iran nuclear deal, didn't mention this. I think we're probably going to see come out of that an agreement where we built Iran's first nuclear plant in 1975. And then 4 years later, the Ayatollah took over, and Russia ever since has helped them maintain the nuclear plants because they have the technology to do it. I think we're probably going to see permission given to Iran to expand their nuclear the energy program, not like the weapons program. I mean, maybe they do get the nuclear weapon, but I think we'll probably see all that rolled back because that threat is, I think, used to manipulate people. You and Chris have talked about that a lot. But I also think we're going to see Saudi Arabia given permission to build a nuclear power plant because MBS has been demanding that for years. And that's really going to trigger Netanyahu because Netanyahu is hell-bent against any Muslim nation having a nuclear power plant. I think what happens is we see Trump and Putin marry on the geopolitical stage, and then they're going to take on the only person who's in their weight class geopolitically, which is Netanyahu. He's the only person who represents the establishment because he represents the Bush dynasty, the Clinton dynasty. All of it is all wrapped up in one figure. So I think it makes sense that if there's a villain for Putin and Trump to take on together, which I think will give catharsis to the American people and help us reset in our mind what the Russians are and that they are actually a brother nation. I think it's going to be Putin and Trump taking on Netanyahu together.
It'd be interesting too, because I think it's been interesting from a Western perspective that the liberal side of the aisle, from a culture perspective, are all unified against Netanyahu and Israel. So wouldn't that be a funny mindfuck to hit liberals with, of being like, well, now Trump and Putin are on your side. So
horseshoe theory.
And,
it's like, yeah.
And we get to see how Ben Shapiro navigates it, which is going to be one of our
That'll be things. The funniest. That'll be the best.
All right, guys, we've gone 2 hours. I think that was, despite screen share issues, probably easily the best power hour of the last few days, for sure, and perhaps ever.
For sure.
So if you liked it, please hit the thumbs up button. You will see both of us in Vegas if you are going to Vegas or joining us virtually. Ghost will be there tomorrow. I will not be there tomorrow. So all you speakers better not give Mrs. Bright a heart attack, and you better be where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. I don't care how disheveled your hair gets. You can get yourself there.
Just be there.
You in chat, anybody who's going to Vegas, make sure that the boys are where they're supposed to be. Maybe Ash will make sure. Let me grab some boosts and rants before we get out of here. Boost from Awake in Mass, $25. Love all your shows. Thank you. I wanted to give a shout out to all New England. We're having a meetup at BJ's Restaurant and Brew House in Framingham, Mass on March 15th at 12. It's a great opportunity to meet people before GART Plymouth. All right, great. BJ's Restaurant and Brew House, Framingham, Mass, March 15th at noon. I'm looking forward to GART Plymouth. That'll be right in my neck of the woods. Pays to know the event planner. I'll have to stop in at one of those at some point. Lionheart sent $100 over. Hey guys, Trump is officially a legend. Pocahontas, what a sack he's got. Absolutely epic. Great time to be alive. Where we go one, we go all. Army of God. God bless.
Thanks,
so
Lionheart.
Lionheart. And yeah, Trump was pretty damn funny there. Did see the little human trafficking clip that went viral. It was I liked it. Points at the establishment. Talks about human trafficking. All right, rants. J.K. Nerdy. $10. My sweet wife, U.S. Air Force and civil service 30 years, who has suffered severe TDS in recent months due to Doge, was actually able to talk fondly about the Survivor Kid and Trump making him an honorary CIA. Wow. You never know what's going to hit somebody. See, I sometimes find stuff like that corny, but I think it was Secret Service, not CIA, by the way.
Yeah, it was Secret Service. And then there was a hilarious clip of him, like Natalie Winters was interviewing him at the White House today, and he was dressed up in his cop get-up, and she shook his hand, and he has like a Steve Urkel kind of vibe about him, which is very endearing. And he says, I just realized this is like, you're the first woman whose hand I've ever shaken. Like, it was just like very like genuine, just coming from like a little kid. And I don't know. That stuff's kind of funny.
Claire Cat 367, $22. Thank you, BB and Ghost, for a fantastic episode this evening, and also for going live for us too. Ease and grace for all traveling to Guard 7, and many blessings to all. Yes, thank you. I hate traveling these days. Hate it. But doing it for the cause. 1027 JS, good conversation. Thank you. I've got what it feels like strep throat, and I hope that goes away.
Nothing, I have a little tickle in my throat.
Nothing some old fashions in Vegas won't fix, I think.
Yeah. Whenever GART rolls around, I feel like I get like oh, I'm gonna get sick now. It's like nope, gotta power through.
Texan by birth, $20. Gosh, this is great without John. Love you too, and your conversation and respect for each other. Thank you. I assume you're joking, but yeah. We'll see if we let him back in. Stacy Anderson, have a strange question. If possible, could the empty cities China built years ago play into Xi's hope for a better future for his country somehow? The Chinese city thing is interesting because I don't know how much of the mimetic nature of the ghost cities is real or fake. I just have to re-question a lot of that stuff. But yeah, that's quite a knot that he's got to untangle over there economically. But man, if you want just some like late night, I've got all these late night YouTube videos now that I throw on when I'm on baby duty after the show. And it is fascinating to just put on some YouTube vlogs in Beijing or around China. Not saying it's not without its issues. And, we've heard about all the surveillance, etc. But it seems a lot different than what you'd think of.
Yeah. Well, and I just saw Reuters said that the story is that China is now like aggressively seeking reunification with Taiwan, and it's like that's very interesting timing. Because I feel like nobody's even thinking about China right now. Everyone has their mind on Russia, Ukraine, and Israel.
Yeah,
and it's
now,
like
some interesting signal there that I picked up a couple of days ago at Trump's presser with TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor. He was asked about national security implications for onshoring domestic chip production. And the reporter asked, does this have anything to do with Chinese aggression toward Taiwan from a national security perspective? And Trump, paraphrasing, basically said, well, I hadn't thought about it like that, but yeah, whatever China ends up doing, now it doesn't matter. So, like, the media was taking that as saying Trump doesn't care or just a non-answer. I saw nobody in the truth community talking about this, and I was immediately on Twitter going, you do realize that Trump just gave Xi the go order on Taiwan, right? Like,
that's hilarious.
Putin got the go order on the Donbass with the 2020 election, and I think maybe Xi got the go order with the Taiwan semiconductor deal, because Trump's like, listen, bro, don't go in there until we get the chips out, and then do whatever you need to do.
I mean, recently I did hear him say a few weeks back, talking about Japan and the tariffs, and he was railing on Japan, which he was doing in the 1980s. He was railing on Japan for their VCRs and their cars. But he's like, we sent our entire electronics manufacturing sector to Japan. Why did we do that? And he said, and then Taiwan. Why did we send all of our chip manufacturing to Taiwan? There was no reason to give Taiwan all of our he was crushing Taiwan. And like, you're not supposed to do that in politics. You're not supposed to crush Taiwan. Just like you're not supposed to crush Israel. You're not supposed to crush Taiwan. And he was just crushing them.
Yep. So we'll see if you believe, these kinds of things. The August to October window is when strategically it would make the most sense, based on seas and tides and all this kind of stuff, to see something. I don't know if we'll see. I don't think we're going to see something fully kinetic. I think we are going to see. I've been calling it for 3 years now, a Gulf of Tonkin rerun. I think we're going to get a Taiwan Strait standoff, and that's going to become a massive international story where you're going to get. By the way, this is one of the reasons you should pay attention to Hollywood propaganda. The recent flop Marvel film, Captain America: Brave New World, featured as its key set piece a standoff in the Pacific between the American and Japanese navies, which was very strange because we're allies. Yeah. So maybe a little bit of seeding. I think we're going to see some tension between East and West in the Taiwan Strait.
Interesting. That is really interesting.
Steph, Asia, you guys are holding down the fort so well. John should give you both a big bonus. He should.
I agree with that.
Melindy, latest from my fave Southern flavored historian. Did Trump destroy the Constitution? Well, we're probably not going to watch it on the show, but Brian McClanahan. Never heard of him, but check him out. Yeah, Scooter 2650, where we go on and we go all. God bless. That is it. Thank you guys very much for watching. Please hit the thumbs up button. Please share the show. And if you're coming to GART, we will see you guys there. If you're watching live, we'll see you there. The format this time is a little different, so I'm looking forward to some big picture discussions. And I guess we got to probably figure out what we're going to talk about. But
yeah,
we can always do that right before we get on stage.
It'll be a good.
It's really about hanging with you people.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, man. Sure. Thanks for joining me, Ghost. Good show, I think. And I let you spurg out to your heart's content on all the Israel stuff.
I appreciate it. I definitely got to scratch my itch, so thank you.
Yep. All right, guys. Thank you very much for watching. I will leave us with a short little clip that's relevant to tonight's discussion. Trump's 2018 UN speech. It's an all-timer, and I think it's always worth revisiting. And it's crazy that this was 7 years ago. 7 years ago, this speech. All right, guys. Peace out. We will see you next time.
The future does not belong to globalists. The future belongs to patriots. The future belongs to sovereign and independent nations who protect their citizens, respect their neighbors, and honor the differences that make each country special and unique. The United States does not seek conflict with any other nation. We desire peace, cooperation, and mutual gain with all. But I will never fail to defend America's interests. America is ready to embrace friendship with all who genuinely seek peace and respect. Many of America's closest friends today were once our greatest foes. The United States has never believed in permanent enemies. We want partners, not adversaries. America knows that while anyone can make war, only the most courageous can choose peace. Around the world, our message is clear. America's goal is lasting. America's goal is harmony. And America's goal is not to go with these endless wars that never end.